That was just for you, Kim, okay? Well, that's not quite yet, okay? Let's take a look at two views this morning. We want to take a look at the world. You know, in our world, we are all being told that we are not good enough. Newspapers, TV programs, advertisements, wherever you find them, tell us that unless we do this or that or use this or that product, we have failed. We failed as mothers and fathers, husbands, wives, sons or daughters. And we're encouraged to seek more and more. Better cars, bigger houses, more money, exotic holidays, a better job, a better paying job. These things will add value to our lives. That's what we begin to think. If I wear the right clothes, if I go and find designer clothing, that will make the man, and I'll be so much better. You know, even we have to be careful. Coming to church, we can find the preacher telling you that you failed. And I, like other preachers, have tried to encourage congregations I've been in to show the love of God into the world, to become better Christians. Yet I wonder sometimes if we make people feel bad. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be times that we don't feel bad, but sometimes we can add to the poison that is out there that we all face. You see, the world wants to put a label to you. Maybe it's a coworker. Maybe it's your boss. Maybe it's your family, a spouse. What are the labels that you find that you wear? You see, the world labels us with all these things. These things give us value according to the world. But in Paul in Romans 12 reminds us, though, that we should not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Paul says that God has a different view of us. And we need to take what the world has to say and think less. We should care less of what man has to say and more to what God has to say. The world would like to beat us down. The world would like to conform us into their mold. The right hairstyle, the right pair of glasses, the right type of clothing. You name it. To act a certain way, to like a certain sport, to play, do this or that. The talents that we have, we get labeled in those. What is the label that you have? What are the labels that you've allowed the world to give you? And what labels have you allowed to stick? Or maybe you've given your own self-label. You might say, oh, I just would like to do this, but I can't because I'm not, you fill in the blank. I'm not a good singer. I'm not a good talker. I can't do this. I can't do that. Those are the labels that the world tries to do. And they tell you when you can't do those things, you are less than you are. That's the world. But God has a different concept, a different view. First of all, we look and we notice that God has made us with detail. We looked at Psalm 139 earlier today as our call to worship. And verses 14 and 15 gives us the understanding that we are a unique creation. You know, when God made you, he broke the mold. And he meant to, because you are uniquely different. Okay? That's the design. We are each different. We may have some similarities, but we are different. Too many times people look at themselves in the mirror and don't like what they see. They don't like the talent or the lack of talent they have. So they question the maker. They question the creator, God himself, and say, I'm not really anything. I'm no good. What use am I? And this is a lie, if you will, straight from Satan. You see, God made us, he formed us, and he put detail into us. He knew we would be born. He knew our likes. He knew our loves. He knows every mystery that we have. Have you ever thought that nothing is a surprise to God? He knows all these things. The word woven that he uses or that we've been knit together has the meaning of needlepoint. And when I went to needlepoint, I began to go to, you remember the times when that cross stitch was very common, and you had to take that needle and you had to be very precise, and you pulled it in and you pulled it back through and pull. I didn't try it, so I'll be quite honest with you. But there's this aspect that you had to have certain threads in certain places, or guess what? You're going to be what? Tearing it out because it wasn't quite the way you wanted it. They're in there precisely to create a beautiful work of art. And that's exactly what it's talking about. It's that way with us. You are a work of art, but not everyone sees art the way others do. We can all look at a picture and say, somebody shake our heads, but the others go, oh, there it is. The most beautiful work an artist sees is the one he creates. You are the most beautiful to God because he created you. Think about our Wemmick story. Sometimes Punchinello would fall and he would scar his wood. And so people would give him dots. He would make excuses why he fell, and people would say, that's silly, and give him more dots. And after a while, he had so many dots that he didn't want to go outside. He was afraid he would do something dumb and get more dots. He had so many dots, people would say he's not a good wooden person, and he deserves the dots. Punchinello even got to the point where he said, I'm not a good Wemmick. See, we can allow the labels to give us, and we say, I'm not a good person. I'm not a creation of God. But God says, I created you. Oftentimes we act like Punchinello. We question, we wonder, we make ourselves nothing. But God chose to form us. He chose to make us, to create us. The next time you don't feel worthy, remember that God made you with detail. He cares about you, and he cares about who you are and what you do. Secondly, we are made deliberately. Verse 16 tells us that we were planned. Your eyes have been, David says, your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book were all written. They're all been written down. And what a beautiful message. God knew us before we were formed. God knew you. He knew me. His detail, his care, his position is all through us. Because we are planned. In his book, it drew us. He had a plan in place for us. And unfortunately, there's times where we do mess it up. But it's not too late to get back on track. He's calling us away from our sin and to the cross to live a life worthy of him. He created us with a purpose. He created me to be doing what I do. I never dreamt that I was going to be a pastor for much of my years. But God had a different plan. And he drew me back. You see, you were created for a purpose. And the question comes, are you on track? Punchinello met a Wemmick unlike any other that he'd met before. Why? She had no stars. And she had no dots. And when people would see her, they saw that she was beautiful, and they thought, oh, she deserves a star, so they go to put on a star. They give her that good label, but the star wouldn't stick. And then when the stars wouldn't stick, what did they do? Well, that's horrible, because the stars won't stick, so, that must mean she's bad, so we've got to give her a dot. But what happened? The dot wouldn't stick. The label wouldn't stick. And Punchinello wanted to know what happened. Why is this the case? And she says, it's because I talk to Eli. I go to Eli. He's the wood carver. He's the one that made me, and I sit in his workshop. Puccinello asked, why? And she just said, why don't you go find out for yourself? Well, he won't see me, Puccinello said, but she walked away. And so he eventually went up that narrow path to the top of the hill, and he stepped into the big shop. He looked around and saw how big everything was, and then he saw the size of the hammer, and he says, I'm not staying here, and he turns to leave. And then he heard his name. Puccinello? Puccinello, how good it is to see you. And to his surprise, he asks, you know my name? And the maker says, of course I made you. And then Eli reached down to pick him up, and he looked at him and he said, you have been given some bad marks. I didn't mean to, he says. I tried really hard. You don't have to defend yourself, he tells him. Don't worry about it, Puccinello. I don't care what the other Wemmicks think. Puccinello says, you don't? No, and you shouldn't either. You shouldn't either. I think you're pretty special. Me special, he responds. My pain is chipped. I can't run fast or jump high. Why do I matter to you? And he says, because you're mine. That's why you're special to me. You see, we head to God because we matter to him. He also gives us direction. Verses 17 to 18 tells us that God thinks about us. How precious also are your thoughts to me. You see, he thinks about us. The Bible tells us that his thoughts are not our thoughts. And no matter what you think about God or whether you think about God, God thinks about you. You are on his mind. Not when will we stop sinning and come home, but he thinks about us as special. We are his creation. In fact, he thinks about us so much that his thoughts of us could not be counted. They are too vast, too many. Not only are we in his thoughts, we are in his presence if we are his children. And the passage ends with this thoughtful, wonderful thing. He says, when I wake up, I am still with you, David says. The Hebrew here indicates that David is saying that this isn't a dream. You see, because when dreams are over, he's still with us. It doesn't end. Puccinello has never seen anyone look at him like this before, much less his maker. He didn't know what to say. Eli then said, every day I've been hoping you would come. They asked, why don't the stickers stick to her? What does he say? Because she has decided that what I had to say was more important than what they think. This is an important aspect. The stickers only stick if you let them. The labels only stick when we let them. That's what he's talking about. And as he goes to leave,